After over 4 years of being in business in my pest control business, we have hired 2 employees in 1 month. And in this video, I'm going to describe just a couple of things that I've learned very quickly that you should know about before hiring your very first employee to make the transition so much easier. So when you hire an employee for any position, of course, there's going to be a training period where you, or once you start growing, other managers are going to be training the employees to do the work that you're delegating. But one thing that I completely underestimated was just how differently things can be done, even if you try to explain it word for word how you want it done. From task in the pest control industry, say you hire a pest control technician and you all go about doing a bedbug treatment one way, but then they came from a background of doing it another, or a German roach treatment one way, and then you do it another, or they do it another. Or in the case of hiring your first admin assistant, say that there's a way that you like to enter the books once a day, they're used to doing it once a week. There's so many different ways that every little task in your business can be done, and there's so many different ways each of those tasks can be done as well. So the first thing that I would suggest you guys first and foremost do is set up a standard operating procedure. It doesn't have to be a binder, it can be like a PDF. I like having digital copies as well as paper copies, and I even went as far as creating laminated copies of every page. I say laminated, all I do is like put them in a sheet protector. You can laminate it, whatever the case may be. But I finally started doing this after my first hire. Most of you guys know that have been with the channel for a minute. Know that we hired a technician first and foremost, and my next hire that we just hired this past week was actually a like administrative assistant. I labeled her as an executive assistant, and I am doing it very differently than when I hired my technician. When I hired my technician, I had a little bit of a leg up. Somebody who I knew. Obviously, he'd own a pest control business. Like, we know each other very well, obviously. But there were still a lot of things that, even to this day, like, we're bouncing ideas like, this is how I used to do it. Oh, well, this is how I do it. This is how we're doing it going forward, yada, 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 which is making my standard operating procedure that I'm building for future technicians even better. But I went ahead and got ahead of it, and we got like 6 pages of just complete, black and white, trying to make it as simple as possible, down to where my 5-year-old daughter could probably even read this and understand how to do the work that I require. And again, this is something that I highly overestimated. It was something that I kind of seen as like corporate BS. We have all these like handbooks and safety modulars and this and that. And as an employee with an employee mindset, I thought that, that was just corporate nonsense, them trying to cover their butts for like insurance purposes, or, making sure they had a reason to fire you if you messed the slightest of things up. But after being just 2 hires in, I realized really quickly that no, more than anything, this is just like a playbook. And I actually, it's funny, I actually now labeled as standard operating procedures, SOPs. The first copy that I actually made of this, I literally called it a cheat sheet playbook. This just sounds more professional in my opinion. The standard operating procedures, executive assistant handbook. So it says handbook still, but it did say something like cheat sheet playbook, something of that nature. But that's pretty much all that it is it's just a cheat sheet for, like, if you forget, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? Everything should be in this book. And like I say, on the very last page of the book, this is updated as of, 4/11/2025. And then it says, there may be other things that come up over time. We will discuss them and update them at the bottom of this page or the next page as necessary. Do not hesitate to ask for any clarification, as this could benefit you and other employees in the future. Because I know there's going to be stuff as the company evolves, and just as we have different people with different backgrounds and things of that nature come in, that there's going to be it could be bad habits, but not even bad habits, just previous ways of doing things that we're going to have to kind of untrain. And in some cases, those previous experiences can actually make our company better as well. So we may actually even go in and delete something and update it based on, what we see as best. A prime example of this is my technician brought to my attention. You guys know we make our own rodent-proof cages. He was like, instead of creating these little brackets, why don't you just add a couple more inches onto your height, and then we can just bend it at the bottom across the entire side. That way, in some of the cages, we were almost having this, not necessarily like a crazy wave look, but it just didn't, from when you're up there looking at it, it didn't look great to us on some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. From the ground level, you couldn't see any of that at all. But again, it's just a preference of ours. And whenever I was thinking through it, I was like, actually, that's a great idea. I was like, we're going to start doing that from now on. So that is in the standard operating procedure. Whatever the measurement is, add a couple inches onto it. I think I said like 3 inches or something like that. And then bend it and make sure that you bend it straight across. And then there's your bracket to mount it to the roof. The next thing I learned was take responsibility for everything that goes wrong in your business and be the last one to take credit when things actually go right in the business. An example of each of these scenarios is one that we actually just had like 2 days ago. So a lot of you are in our Discord group chat. We actually had our first attic insulation, remediation service where we pull out all the old insulation. We sanitize it down from where there are a bunch of rodent droppings and urine and things of that nature. And then we go ahead and blow it in with tap insulation. Now, like pretty much every big job, whenever it's your like first time doing it and filling out the contract and all this stuff, you are obviously going to miss something. And whenever we were in the quoting process and we sent out the quote, I did not specify in that quote, which is the contract, because we have them sign it upon approval, which acts as the contract. But I did not specify in there that we were not going to be insulating over the garage, even though the garage didn't have any insulation. It looked like somebody might have threw like 2 spare extra bats up there, probably a total of like 3-foot sections, 2 of them total, all the way at the front, like almost looked like they were just putting it there to have it out of the way more than anything. They weren't laid down or anything like that. But the customer, after the fact, reached out to us and was just like, hey, why was this section not done? I can see where like stuff was removed. So I don't know if she was under the assumption that it was all over the garage or what. We're actually going back out there this week because we just pretty much agreed that, at the end of the day, we did not necessarily specify it word for word. Now, we were pretty clear that whatever we were pulling out is where we were going to be blowing back in. So, I mean, technically, if she really wanted to push hard, she could be like, oh, well, those 2 rows definitely need to be done. So I was just like, look, at the end of the day, it's not worth you having hard feelings or obviously us getting potentially our first bad review ever after almost half a decade in business. We don't want you to feel like we're doing you wrong or anything. I can see where this was miscommunicated. I, as the owner and the one that sent the quote out, obviously took full responsibility for that, which my technician was like, well, yeah, to be fair, I didn't necessarily explain it because he was the one that went out there and actually quoted the original job. So he was communicating to me like, oh, well, I actually didn't do that either. So it just creates like a good, whenever you as the owner, you're not going straight to the technician or whoever the case may be on the team that, who cares at the end of the day who is at fault. But, when you as the owner, the person at the top is just taking all the responsibility, there's something about that I can already tell resonates with, your other team members, employees, whatever you want to refer to them as. They're going to respond much differently than if, like, say you just went to them and were like, what the hell are you doing? Why didn't you tell me that? Why didn't you tell me to put that in the quote? You're forcing them to be like defensive and be like, oh, well, you didn't tell me like this and that. Like, it's a totally different conversation. Like, I didn't want him to feel like he was at wrong. Like, we had a conversation, I told him that, man, I know I technically did not put that in the estimate. It does read like, whatever we pulled out, we are blowing back in, which is what we did. But at the same time, we got to, make sure on our quotes, that's something that's going to be in there in like very easy black and white, similar to the standard operation procedures. We need to have it in clear cut, black and white. This is exactly what we are doing to a T. This is what we are not doing. And then like he said as well, yeah, no, we need to also like remember to do that when we're like talking about it as well. Cause he says something along the lines of like, yeah, I don't think that I even mentioned that to her either. I just said, whatever we're pulling out, we're blowing in, which of course, seems logical. If there's nothing right there, then we're not going to put nothing right there. But you can obviously see where there could be some miscommunication. And then of course, like the customer mentioned to us, like, attic remediation service is not cheap. Like, if that wasn't included, it definitely should have been mentioned that way. Again, there just wasn't any miscommunication or anyone feeling like they were done wrong at the end of the day. But again, like I said, how different do you think the conversation between me and my technician would have been if instead of me going straight to the estimate and just thinking in my head, because of how I wired my mind as the leader, quote unquote, to think about my business in terms of everything is my fault. like I tell my wife, my kids, like I tell everybody, when you start to realize, or at least start to think, even if it's not necessarily true, whenever you start to think about everything, be it in business or life in general, that, hey, what was my fault versus what was someone else's fault, everything just gets a lot better, because a lot of times you're not necessarily at fault. Somebody else may be at fault, but whenever you start to go and analyze, okay, what could I have done differently? That opens everybody else up to being like, well, he's not coming at me at all about like what I could have done. So like, what could I have done? Like, you start to just change your entire culture of your team, regardless if it's in your business or in your household, whatever the case may be. I found it's a totally just different way psychologically. Can be manipulative if you use it wrong, but if you're going at it from like a good, you're being a good person and you actually want to solve the problem, it's just going to build your culture, make it that much stronger, and you're going to have more honest communication, which is obviously going to lead to better results in your business, which we have already seen translate in just over a month of having our technician. And now, like I said, we just hired our second employee, which is a admin assistant, this past week. But what's the flip side to that coin? Instead of worrying about how do we go about handling situations that are maybe going wrong compared to what they should be, how do we handle the situations that are going right? It's pretty much just the complete opposite. Instead of being super slow like we are in terms of to call out a team member for doing something wrong, and actually trying to look at it from the lens of what could we have done as the leader to make this situation avoidable, we're doing the complete opposite. Instead of being slow to react, we're quick to praise, we're quick to reward, in terms of, you don't necessarily want to like brown nose or anything, obviously, but you want to be quick to acknowledge like, hey, that was a really good idea. Going back to that example where my technician came up with the idea for the cages, in terms of, instead of building separate pieces that takes more time to, one, mount them to the cage first and foremost, and then, like we said, not even get the most desired result that we're wanting in terms of mounting it to the roof. Just a totally great idea all around. I was super quick to be like, damn, I don't know why I don't know why I didn't think of that. Like, that's an amazing idea. Like, being quick to give those words of affirmation that like, hey, that was awesome. Like, do more of that, right? And then obviously rewarding financially as well, which is why I love doing pay structures that reward technicians, management, whatever position possible. I love giving payment incentives for hitting certain milestones. For example, our technicians get 5% commission on anything that they sell, or at the bare minimum, something that they go pitch, and maybe like I go in on the back end and follow up, even though my follow up may have resulted in the sale. If the technician didn't go out there, quote it, give a good impression, then that sale would have had no chance in the first place. Like, it doesn't matter. Now, if I go out and I do most of the, like, say I do the quoting and then I sell it, obviously I'm getting, the quote unquote commission or whatever for that. But when a technician goes out there and carries most of the workload in terms of selling something, we're giving 5% for that. We're giving bonuses for them getting reviews that mention their name. If you actually go to our Google Business profile, you'll actually see at least one, if not, I think 2 or 3 now, reviews that actually mention our technician Eric. And that's because he gets bonuses anytime that a review mentions his name. So are we having to give up more money? Because you all know we usually give a little bit of like a discount on a future service if a customer leaves a review for us. And then now we're giving a little bit of compensation, nothing crazy, but a little drip as well, a little bonus for each review that mentions their name. Yes, we're giving up a little bit more money, but obviously, as you guys know, based on the data that I continue to show you guys, like how much we're getting in business strictly from our Google Business profile alone, it more than pays for itself, obviously. So to recap this entire point right here, we are super slow to be critical of anybody within our team. We actually show them that, we're actually being critical of ourselves in terms of, hey, how could I have put you in a better position for this to not happen? Or what could I have simply done in the case of, the attic job? I said I should have quoted that better I should have actually worded that better in the quote to where it was in fully just obvious dumbed down language where a 5-year-old could understand it. And then on the flip side, we are super quick to actually give words of encouragement, give, financial compensation, whatever the case may be that's fitting. Obviously, you don't need to pay them for, oh, good job, thanks for showing up on time today, obviously. But like, where it's obvious, give words of affirmation, build them up, let them know that what they're doing matters, because that's what employees want at the end of the day, is they want to know that, they're not just coming in, clocking in, earning you, you know, $1,000 to $10,000 in a day or whatever they're earning you in a day, while they're earning a couple hundred to maybe 1,000 or so if they're lucky in a day, and then going home about their life. Like, they want to know that they're coming in with a clear mission, with ownership and management that cares and is mission focused and recognizes and rewards their teammates based on the outputs that actually are the end result of just the entire team working together, doing everything that we've talked about over the last 5 minutes or so in this video. And then the last thing that I learned is, which I already knew this was going to be the case, but I wish that I had done it and was able to do it much earlier. I, to a degree, kind of overestimated just how much that it was going to cost to like bring in an employee on, especially like admin staff and things of that nature. I thought it was going to be like astronomically expensive. And don't get me wrong, like, payroll tax sucks. If there's one thing I hope this administration, not to get too political, but if there's one thing I hope this administration does, is abolish payroll tax altogether. I would, or at least throw some kind of incentive in there where, like, hey, if you can prove on paper that, you know, instead of paying your, for us, it's like 8.6% or something like that, right around 8.5%. Instead of paying the government that 8.5%, you give your employees a 8.5% bonus, or, you know, raise, whatever the case may be. Then, you know, you don't have to pay that. Like, just something, just get rid of payroll tax, because it's ridiculous. Like, it adds up to hundreds of dollars a month per employee. So, like, it is a lot, but I thought it was going to be like 10% or more, roughly, based on my calculation. Every state's a little bit different with like unemployment tax or unemployment insurance, all that different type of stuff. But I definitely overestimated it to a degree, which is a good thing, obviously. But I definitely wish that I did it sooner. And like I've talked about on this channel before, had I not made a couple of small noob, you know, get too much money too quick mistakes, man, I can only imagine where we would be right now. But I'm definitely thrilled that, you know, like I said, in the last month, we've hired 2 employees. The goal at the rate that we are going, because we're set, our goal for this month is $40,000 to $50,000 in sales, which would blow our record out of the water. Our record is somewhere around like 22, 25. Forget the exact dollar, but it's like $22,000, $24,000. If we don't sell anything the rest of this month and just everything goes, we're already set for something like 33. And it's only what, the 12th or 13th of the month at the time of me recording this video. So I think we're pretty safe to hit our 40 that we're aiming for. But like I said, we're aiming for 40 to 50,000, and our goal overall is to hopefully get another technician here sometime between July at the earliest. My goal is by the 4th of July to be hiring another full-time technician, and then, you know, worst case scenario, I'm thinking probably like the end of the year. But again, like I told you guys over and over and over, I knew once we got this first technician in place and we started getting this ball rolling, we started getting all these operation procedures in place, and we're able to start duplicating a bunch of little me's over and over and over and over and over. Once you get that first one, it's like we're just breaking down a dam, and now it's just like the floodgates are being released. So if you're not already following my journey and you're just wondering, and you're still tuning in, by the way, who the heck is this guy? My name is Griffin Thomas. I own a company, as you can see at the title of this here, Preferred Pest Management, in the Dallas, Texas area. We've been in business for 4.5 years now, almost 5 years. And on my channel overall, I just document my entire business journey. We got something around 1,000 videos total on this channel. Just me, like I said, documenting my journey for you guys. I took this business from 0 to 6 figures in my first year, and we're starting to march our way up to that 7-figure range before we know it. And like I said, hopefully my content can benefit you guys in any way. If you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to shout them out in the comments down below. We also do have a free Facebook group and Discord group you can join, which are in my description box down below under my LinkTree. And then there's other helpful links down there for you guys as well, in terms of just like referral links that give you discounts and things of that nature. And we do live streams on this channel periodically as well. We're getting down to the point, because I'm just so busy, I mean, in a good way, but just so busy right now, that we're only getting like probably 1 or 2 a month in. So definitely subscribe and hit the bell icon. I try to schedule them at least a few hours to a day in advance when possible, or even more when I can put it on my calendar. That way, you know, you guys know in advance when we're going to be going live, because like I said, those are becoming a little bit far and few in between at this point. But yeah, like I said, we love to have you in all of our groups and love to have you as part of our community. We're marching up to 5,000 subscribers pretty quickly. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. I love you all. Go out there and get the money and get the life that you and your family deserves. And I'll see you guys in the next video or podcast. Shout out to those of you listening on the podcast audio.